Okay, so I have that there. Let me go grab a clip. I like to use clips to kind of hold my paper in place so it doesn't just flip up the whole time. All right, so today we're going to be painting some Indian blanket together. And I was just telling my in-laws, they came over here today to watch our kids. And my parents right now, they're out of town, so they asked us to watch their dogs. And one of their dogs found a really great spot to lay out in our yard right on my Indian blanket plant. So the plant is kind of destroyed now. I'm really sad about it. But I was like, oh, that's kind of ironic since that's what I'm painting today. An Indian blanket flower for you guys. So I'm going to go ahead and just start getting my paints all wet. I'm going to grab a pencil so I can start sketching it out. Okay. So I won't officially start painting until exactly 10 o'clock. So this is just kind of a little pre-game, I guess. The before show. So I'll start by roughly placing my Indian blanket flowers. So there's an oval there. Another oval there. This one is going to be more of a full flower. This one will be a side view. And then I have a smaller bud here. I think I'm actually going to make this one just a little bit larger. Okay. So I have two main stems in this composition. So we'll do one stem, just kind of softly bending, going towards the right, and then kind of curving towards the left just a bit. And then I have one that I'll give a little bit of an S bend to. Like that, and then a smaller stem connecting those. And I want there to be a height difference of about like an inch. I don't want them to like just land at the same spot at the bottom. I want it to feel natural, nice and soft. Okay, so I have the center of this flower right here. So notice it's not in the center, it's kind of towards the top. And then over here, the top of this flower will be sitting right at the very top. So they're just kind of two oval shapes there. Okay, I'm going to draw out some petals now. I will start by, I think I'm actually going to, now that I kind of have the placement where I want it to be, I kind of like to just mostly erase what I did just so I can just faintly sort of see. And then I'm going to just draw some of my petals here. So notice there's some foreshortening happening here. These petals are a little bit shorter than the ones that are going to be down here. So I'm only making them about the thickness, maybe a little bit more of the center stamen area. One thing I'm really trying to think about is not making them all too perfect. Like I kind of say like a fanned out deck of cards. You want there to be some variety, some varying lengths. You don't want it to feel like they're just like perfectly, one next to the other. So just try and create little gaps and spacing. Okay, and so as I'm kind of moving towards this side, I'm going to start making these a lot longer. Actually, I'm going to even make some of these sideways petals a little bit longer as well. It's a better eraser. I need to use this one, not the click pencil. I'll do the same thing over here. Just maybe lengthen that one a tiny bit. And just notice that the petals kind of have like a little bit of a ruffled, scalloped tip to them. They don't go to a point like a sunflower. Kind of gives these a nice, like, I don't know, wildflower feel, I think. That little detail of that scalloped kind of ruffled edge. Okay. And then let's draw this one right here. So this one, we don't see any of the petals in the back. We only see the ones over here on the left side. I'll go ahead and erase my that pencil marking because I already know where I want it to be. Okay. All right, so I'm going to start drawing in some of these leaves. So I'm going to try and be intentional about creating some interesting shapes here. If you're just following along, if you've already sketched it out ahead of time, you don't need to worry about this, but if you are following along with me as I'm drawing, this is a good practice, practicing drawing leaves. A lot of times our brain tells us that the shape of a leaf is just basically like this, you know what I mean? Like just a regular leaf, kind of that, I guess like pointed shape. But so often when we actually see leaves, they're actually like curling and turning and facing away and facing towards us. There's a lot of variety in the shapes of leaves. And so training your eye to like see them when you look at nature, it's such a good practice to just practice sketching leaves. A lot of people struggle with it. I think it's a pretty common challenge. Let's see here. I'm going to do one that's going up and then down, kind of like a upside down U shape. Line there, connect to that tip, and connect back to the stem. And then I have a couple more leaves I'll draw underneath here. And then I'll do another one just like this shape. Connect back. Very similar there. Maybe I'll make this one. Yeah, I'll mix it up whenever I paint. I don't want it to feel too much of like a clone stamp there. Okay. Let's do some leaves over on this left side. So we'll do a large one going up, connecting back down. We'll do some smaller leaves growing on this smaller stem. And since I'm free sketching mine, I'm not I'm not tracing mine. So mine does look a little different than the reference sketch, which really shouldn't make much of a difference when it actually comes to painting. But one thing I do want to include, because I actually think it's a great detail, is in my reference sketch I do have some overlapping leaves. So I'm going to try and think about how I can incorporate that, the overlaying leaf. So what if I were to just draw let's draw a leaf right here so that we have that overlap. That makes it feel very true to nature too. I think details like that, where there's just a lot of overlapping. Okay, I'm going to erase the lines here that I don't need to see. I think I want to see one more leaf right in here, but let me give it a little bit of thought here. How about I'll do a small leaf that's kind of going away from us. So just kind of do the shape of an upside down triangle right there. It kind of gives the illusion of a leaf that's growing in the opposite direction of us. And let me just take inventory here for a moment. Make sure I like how this is all feeling. Okay. And, you know, as we actually begin to paint, let me make this little bud a little smaller. But as we begin to paint, I'll, bring in the details of all these little, because like all Indian blanket petals are like half red, half yellow. But I think that's something I'll articulate that with paints. Here I do want to draw one more little detail. Another oval within the oval, kind of at the top. And over here I'll just accentuate where the top of this Indian blanket flower is going to be as well. Okay. And then I think I'll do another tiny leaf right here. All right, so if you're just joining me today, I just finished sketching my composition. Hopefully you have downloaded it and you have your sketch all ready to go. If not, go ahead and you can just pause this video and catch up if you need to. Or you can just draw it without a sketch. Be curious to see how it turns out. I think this is one I think I might feel comfortable drawing this one without a sketch. I don't always feel that way, but this one, I think it could turn out pretty good even without a sketch. Hopefully you enjoy what you create today. I think this is a really great flower for maybe, like, I wouldn't say necessarily beginner, but there's not so much detail in it that it's a more intermediate flower. I think it's pretty easy. Okay, so I'm going to start by getting my palette clean because I always forget to do that first. But I love all the colors I love to start painting with a dirty palette, just when I'm painting, on my own. I love all the mixes I get. There's always surprises, and so I always enjoy that. I'm also going to really quickly open this live over on my iPad because I forgot to get that going. Let's see. YouTube. Let's open that up. Okay. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat and I will see them off to the side and I can answer them hopefully as I'm painting. Okay, this is not a perfect clean-up job here, but I think it's good enough. So I have a couple different brushes here today. I'm going to use a size 6 and another size 6. Where did that one go? Oh, it's behind me. Okay, so I have 2 size 6 brushes. And I'm going to get started with some color mixing today. So what we're going to do today is we'll do a few different passes. So first we're going to start with the kind of underwash, the bottom layer of this painting. Then we'll do some midtones, start to bring out some form. And then the last thing we'll do is start to add detail at the very end. So it's kind of in 3 phases. So getting started, I am going to just get some yellow here. There's still a lot of green there, so I don't want to dilute the yellow. Okay, good enough. Okay, so I'm using Indian yellow. I thought I had to use Indian yellow today since we're doing Indian blanket. Just makes sense. And I'm going to do just a light watery wash of Indian yellow. And I will go ahead and just paint all of my flowers, the entire flower, even the center, all of my petals. So this is a wet on dry wash, just trying to make it kind of smooth, pretty even amount of color. Turning off my ceiling fan because one of my other videos recently, I realized how clickety-clackety my ceiling fan is. It's early enough in the morning that I won't be suffering too much. Okay. There we have it. Even layer of Indian yellow. Pull it in just a little tighter. I really want you to be able to see what I'm doing here. Okay, and then for the small tiny one, I think I could maybe add some red here. Hold on one second. I'll add a little bit of yellow there, even though that's going to be just a little red bud. We don't need to do that, but okay, we'll let that dry. Let's go over to our leaves. So for our leaves today, I'm going to mix some Viridian. And you do not have to get as fancy as my goal today was to give you like a very limited color palette. But if you just have like a green that you like to use, if you like to just use sap green, olive green, whatever green, you can use whatever green you want to use. But I'm going to do a little color mixing because I think it makes for an interesting painting to have some color mixing. You just kind of always end up with something a little bit different than you started off with. You never know exactly what you're going to get, and you can really get to a color that's sort of unique. So I'm going to use a little bit of Viridian, a little bit of burnt umber, and a little bit of Indian yellow. So right now mine looks way too yellow, way too brownish yellow, so I'm going to grab a lot more green, mix it in there. Once you get it to a color that you like, whatever your preference is, I'm trying to just find something that feels like, when I see Indian blanket, I see that the leaves are kind of they're very like earthy green. They're not like a bright yellow, not like grass or like Cosmo foliage. It's definitely a very earthy, kind of desaturated green. So adding that brown, tiny bit of that yellow, that really helps to sort of get us there. Once you have a beautiful watery kind of mix here, go ahead and drop it in. And I'm going to do all of my leaves the same color, but I think what I'll do is I'm going to try and be intentional to make some even lighter than others. So I can just blot it on my paper towel just to get a little bit of a lighter green, or you can dip your brush in water and that'll dilute it a little bit as well. Just dropped it in water, get a little bit more color in my brush. Going out of the lines there a little bit, so let me go ahead and blot that up. Go ahead and paint all my little stems here. where these two overlap, we'll just do the exact same color on them for now. Later on, I'll make this back petal a little bit darker so it looks like there's some shadow there. This is the fun part of the painting, the easy part, I'll say, not fun. It's all fun, but this is the easy part because it kind of just feels like you're filling in a coloring book page. And I actually think it's more fun to be adding detail, personally. Later on, this is sort of the part you just gotta lay down the color, get that foundation, and then I think it's so much more fun to actually start articulating shapes and start bringing out detail. I've often said it kind of feels like archaeology, like you're digging for some dinosaur bones, just kind of working it out. All right. And then the last thing I guess I need to do here is the stem here. Let's make sure I paint my stems. Try and do about the same thickness. Kind of goofed this spot here. Didn't really lift up, so I'm just going to go with that. Make that leaf a little larger. All right. So then now we'll let the green dry and then go back to our flowers. So the flowers should be mostly dried, at least they are for me here. If they're not, just give it another minute. And I'm going to get some cadmium red. And I'll use this yellow that's already here. I want this to be very rich, very, very rich. Strong color. So get some cadmium red, Indian yellow mixed. And what we're going to do now is, this is going to be kind of fun here. So what I'll do is I'll get a little bit of water, just a damp layer of water. And I'm going to do a layer just kind of right up to the center, but I'm not painting the center of the flower. I'm just putting a little bit of dampness on my petals, okay? And then what I'll do, watch this, okay? Watch closely. So I'm going to just drop some of this red towards the top of these petals. And then I'm going to let some of that dampness just kind of very subtly diffuse the color, if that makes sense. Kind of feather it out. It's very subtle, but it's going to help to just create a not so harsh line of paint. So I'll keep going around, dropping in this damp, just a little bit more dampness. If your paint's still a tiny bit wet, it could definitely work. I just don't want the color to pool into the center. Not necessarily. Okay, and then just kind of moving around. Dropping that in. My goal here is I want the tips of all of my flower petals to stay yellow. And also, if you've got kind of different lengths of red, notice how like right here, this is going a lot farther down than over here. I would embrace that. You kind of I don't want it all to feel exactly the same. I want each petal to feel a little bit unique in some tiny way. Okay, so I'm gonna let that one start to dry. I'll do the same thing over here. So I'm going to dampen these petals, just going right up to the center stamen area, but keeping that circle dry there. So just adding that dampness. And then using my other brush to drop in this rich red color. I will say this is a pretty controlled type of painting, you know, like especially, I don't know, I feel like having a sketch already, it'll always kind of lend it towards being a little bit more detailed, just having that really detailed sketch underneath it. But I love to find moments where I can just let the watercolor be watercolor, if that makes sense. Like I love to see those little tiny blooms, just those moments of looseness, because like I said, it's a very controlled painting. But if we can find moments to just enjoy the properties of watercolor, just enjoy its kind of natural tendency, I think I always end up liking those paintings a lot more. This one's starting to dry kind of light, but it's still wet, but it is starting to dry a bit. So I'm going to just go ahead and drop another layer of some of this rich red color. Drop it in there. I want this to be pretty dramatic. It's a dramatic little flower. I think these are they also called pinwheel flowers? Does that sound right? If anybody knows any other names for these flowers, let me know. I don't even know what the actual name of them is. Like the, you know, like black-eyed Susans are called like rudbeckia, coneflower is echinacea. What is the, if you know like the scientific name for Indian blanket flower, you should let me know. Okay, so it's looking good. I like how this is shaping out. I'll go ahead and just drop some red here as long as this is all dry. Drop it right there. Keep that little green leaf. Okay. That's a little cute flower. My son, he doesn't understand like the word cute. Like he thinks the word cute means small. So anytime I tell him he's cute, he's like, no, I'm not cute, I'm big. So now I think I'll always like think of the word cute just meaning small. So he'll talk about his sister and just be like, Alma's cute. This tomato is cute. So that's a little cute flower. All right, just dropping in a little bit more of that red, a little bit more over here. And then we'll let this dry and then go back to our leaves. All right. Oh, Sam, I just saw your comment. So it's called Gaillardia pulchella. That's a mouthful. Oh my goodness. Okay, so let's go back to our leaves. We're going to add some depth now. We're going to use that same mix. So I have Viridian, a little bit of yellow. I went a little too hard last time, just a little too much. And then that's too much too. I just squeezed fresh burnt umber onto my palette. And I forget that when you put fresh paint on, you just I just globbed my brush into it. Okay, so I gotta get a lot of green in here. I want to create a really dark mix here. And I will start up here, start up at the top and just add some shading right here to this stem. The back side of this little petal, I'm gonna add some darker green. I'm gonna imagine the light is kind of coming from this direction. Go ahead and add some depth to this stem here. I think I had a little too much coffee today. My hands don't feel as steady as normal. Okay, I'll add a little bit of shading to this leaf here. And just back there. The underside of this curling leaf, just inside there, I'll add some shading. Also, just a maybe side note here, if you want to switch to a smaller brush here, if you feel like that would help you with these details, feel free. My brush is fairly new, so I have a nice point on it, but a size 6 might be a little bit large for this. So if you want to switch, by all means, switch to a smaller brush. Let me think here. I am going to add some depth to this stem here. I'm definitely aware that my sketch is not the same as my reference sketch, so I apologize if that is throwing you off at all. Hopefully not, but the you know, the application, the details are still kind of the same, but the sketch is not identical. I'll add just a little bit more depth to this leaf here. I'm going to switch between brushes here. I'm going to use a damp brush to smooth that color out. I've been using these, so I typically use round brushes, and this is a round brush right here. But I also just recently got a rigger brush, which is just like, notice the difference. It's super subtle, but this one is just this is the rigger. It's just like a longer point, and I've been really enjoying using them. It's like a little bit more of like a softer touch, I would say. It doesn't have as much spring as a round brush, but I've been enjoying using riggers. I don't typically use them, and it's been interesting. I actually really like how soft they apply paint. I find that for more of like a loose kind of application, if I'm doing maybe like a loose stem and I want it to feel really natural and soft, I like to use the rigger brush. So if you don't have one, you might want to consider adding a rigger brush to your set of tools. Over here, I'm going to go ahead and smooth out this leaf back there. I'm going to add a tiny bit more paint to this one. They are, well, some of them are still feeling a little more light than I want, so I'm going to add just a little bit more green in a few places. Watercolor always dries pretty light. It dries lighter than you expect. So just always be ready to do a couple more layers. I think that that's a mistake a lot of times people make with watercolor painting. Beginner painters can just, put one layer of paint down and then kind of be done. But you have to paint in layers. And somebody told me once, when I said that many years ago, when I first started teaching, I said that you have to paint in layers. I remember somebody told me that I wasn't using quality paint if I had to paint so many layers, because you should only have to paint one layer. That was very wrong. That was not true, because I've always used good quality paints. That's how watercolor works. Like, it just dries light. It has nothing to do with quality. That's just how it goes. It's just as it absorbs into the paper, it just is a little bit lighter. Dries a little bit lighter. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna let my leaves, my leaves and my stems dry a bit, and I will go back to the flowers here. So, cleaning my brush off, I'm gonna start working on the center. I'm gonna start working on the center color. So I'm gonna use cadmium red and a little bit of burnt umber. If you have burnt sienna, you could use burnt sienna here. There's a lot of different colors you could use here, but I want this to be mostly brown. So grabbing that burnt umber, make sure that your flowers feel pretty dry here, your petals. Mine are not completely dry, but they're definitely dry enough that even if there's a tiny bit of bleed, it won't affect it too much. So I'm going to go around and I'm just going to keep that center area light and just drop this dark brown color. I'm kind of doing just these little dabby brush strokes here. I'm not just like painting it in a circle. I want there to be these little moments where I still see the yellow underneath it. So I'm trying not to fully just cover it, if that makes sense. I will go all the way around the back side here, just doing these little tiny marks. Use a small brush here. And the same thing right here, trying to keep that top area light. So just do these little marks here, working my way up towards the center. I'm going to grab just a little bit more of that pure burnt umber. Just drop it in there. Let the water kind of move it around for me. And then these little, tiny little wispies. All right. It's feeling good. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my mix here. I'm going to go ahead and grab a little bit more red. So I'm going to make this mix here kind of like a 50-50 cadmium red with burnt umber or raw umber, whatever it is, whatever brown color you are using. And now I'm going to start adding some detail to my petals. So right now it looks pretty good, but I do want to add some definition here. So what I'm going to do is where there's the lines from one petal to the next, I'm going to add some little shadow lines. Just these little kind of subtle veins. And you don't have to get super detailed here. It's just going to create a nice little effect. Just add a little bit more depth, a little more definition. And this is something you really can only do once your petals are dry. So if they're not dry, give it a minute, pause the video. You can go grab a blow dryer if you want to, and then add those details. All right, I'm gonna do the same thing over here on this right side flower, definitely add that dark red along those lines where they're overlapping one another, but then also just add a few little veins just in the flowers, in the petals themselves, moving downward. Okay, so I'm gonna let that dry. I'm gonna go over to my leaves. I think I might add one more detail to the flower afterwards, but let me give it a sec. Give it a little bit of thought. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to my green, my Viridian green mix here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm gonna do a similar kind of effect as what I did earlier. I'm gonna switch to my other brush actually, just because I like the point in this other one a lot. Okay, I'm gonna start over here on the left side, and I'm gonna add a few veins. Just like that. Maybe in some of them you just want to add one or two little lines. Keep it kind of inconsistent. I heard a great quote yesterday, the day before yesterday. I'm going to tell you guys about it. It was a watercolor book I was reading. I cannot remember the name of it, but if I remember it, I'll link it below. But he said that watercolor, or paintings, specifically he was talking about watercolor, but paintings are a conversation between the artist and the viewer. When you fill in all of the information, for somebody, if you're trying to make a photorealistic flower painting, you leave the viewer with nothing to do. And so, you know, in that sense, it's kind of like, what do you want from me? Just to be impressed? Like, I don't have a job to do. You know, the viewer might feel that way. Like, I don't have anything to fill in with my mind. When you fill in all the details for me, I'm kind of paraphrasing, obviously. That was sort of my takeaway. And I was like, what an insightful thought. That you don't want to fill in all the information for your viewer. You don't want to make it like photorealistic, perfect. I mean, maybe you do, but it's so much more interesting when you kind of have a little bit like left to the imagination. You know, I don't want to fill in every single tiny stroke that you would see in life. It's so much more interesting that way. So think about that next time you're wanting to make your painting maybe a little too detailed. Just like leave something for the viewer to do. Okay, so think. I'll add a little bit more depth in here in a few places. Add a few more little veins in here. For these larger flowers, larger leaves, I definitely want to have some veins in those ones, in those big leaves here at the bottom. You can always take your brush, as you start to lose paint, you can use that soft edge to come back and work on those leaves and petals over here, or leaves and stems over here. You can use a brush for so much more than just dropping paint. We use it to sort of smooth paint out. You can use it to lift paint. The more comfortable you become with your brushes, you'll find how useful of a tool they are for more than just dropping paint. That's how we do everything, huh? Okay, I'm gonna let this dry for a minute. I'm gonna go back to my flowers. Okay, last thing. Yeah, I think I do want to add just a tiny bit more. So I'm going to grab a little bit of this Indian yellow, put it over here, and a tiny bit of brown. So that raw umber with a tiny bit of Indian yellow. And I think that the tips of my petals, I'm going to add just a little bit. I'm not going to cover the yellow, but I just feel like I want to see a little more definition. So I'm not even really, I don't know, I'm trying to describe what I'm doing here. I'm just basically adding just these little dashes at the very end of my petals. And I think it gives it a little bit more depth. We're changing the tone a little bit, so we're adding, a little bit of brown to it. So it's making it more of this like desaturated yellow. If you have yellow ochre, this is almost exactly the color of yellow ochre. You could just use that. But like I said, my palette today was limited, so I'm just challenging myself to stick with those colors. I'm going to use this same color. This is yellow and Indian yellow with a little bit of brown in it. I'm going to drop that here in the center. Dab it in there. If you went a little too heavy on some of your color, you could definitely just use a towel and blot it up. Let me see how everything is drying here. It's feeling good. Okay, I'm going to go back to my leaves here. I like to just kind of bounce around, give areas time to dry. So I'm going to grab a little bit more of my green color here. And just in a few places, just to add a little more drama, I'll drop this rich green color along the right side of my stems. Okay. I think I like my leaves, my stems, so I think I will let them be. You can always start to overwork it. I don't want to do that, so I'll let it be. I think it looks really nice. I'm actually happy with these leaves. The last detail I want to add, something I'm just kind of craving to see, is I want a little bit more depth in my petals, just in a few places. So I'm going to grab more red, more brown. Just want it to be a dark, warm red. And I'm just going to add a couple more lines, basically where petals are overlapping one another. you know, like we said, it just dries light. So just adding a tiny bit more definition, trying not to cover too much of just the red. You know what I mean? I don't want to just cover up the light red. I want that to still be in there as well. So make sure you're using a really nice tip as you do this, because I don't want you to just make it like dark brown all around. You want that light red to still be really, really like prevalent in this painting. So do this with a light touch. Okay. Last thing I guess I'll do is just add a tiny bit more depth to my little bud right there. This flower looks really nice. I won't change much there. I think that feels pretty good. So the last thing I would do, but I won't do it just for the sake of time here, is erase all my pencil markings after it's totally dry, but I won't hold you here for that long. So all right, well, let's see here, finishing thoughts here. Yep, I'm happy with how this turned out. It feels like, I think having so much brown in this painting, it creates such a natural, soft, sort of desaturated color palette, which I love. I love a desaturated kind of earthy. If you were to actually see an Indian blanket here, you'd probably see that it's probably a lot more bright red than mine actually ended up being, but you know, it's just sort of my interpretation. So yeah, that's feeling pretty good. What other thoughts do I have? Yeah, just notice how we have so many different shades of green going on, right? Like we have like the really light moments, dark moments, and I pretty much use the same color the whole time, but there really is such a spectrum, right, of lights and darks, and some feel a little bit like they're leaning more towards the blue, and some feel like they're leaning a little bit more towards the yellow I added towards it, which is actually really nice. I like to have that mix of cool and warm when I can. This one feels like it's mostly warm, but there is a few moments of, because Viridian is a very cool green, it leans more towards blue. So I love how that's feeling. Sam asked, could you let us know what Rosemary & Co. brush you're using? Oh yes, I can. I love them. This is like my new favorite brush company. I'm obsessed. So I'm using Rosemary & Co. This is a sable blend. Okay, so it's not full sable. There's some synthetic hairs in there as well, but I couldn't justify, especially because I bought like, I'll show you, I bought a size 16 round brush, and I was not about to spend like $3,000 on a sable brush. I don't think it was that much, but I was like, I can't afford whatever it was. So I did the synthetic blend, or sable blend. So it's probably mostly synthetic hairs, but just the fact that the marketing, like, oh, it's a blend. I'm like, okay, well, it's mostly sable then, right? But probably not. So this is series 401 for my round brushes, and then the rigger brush is series 771 for the riggers, and those ones are size 4. The rigger is size 4. I thought it was a 6, but it's a 4. My round brush is a 6, and yeah, I love to just have a mix of round sizes. Yeah, I'm really happy with the Rosemary brushes. The only thing that was maybe like a slight downside, not that big a deal, but they do have to ship from England. So whenever you order, just make sure that you are factoring in that shipping time, because it takes a little longer than, Amazon. But all right, well, I guess that's all. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this, whether you're watching it live or on the replay. And if you're interested in more consistent tutorials from me, you can always join me on Patreon. And we're making over there we're doing drawing tutorials and monthly watercolor tutorial. I have a feedback option. And yeah, I would love to see you over there. So hope you have a beautiful day, and I will talk to you very soon. Bye-bye.